Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I'm exceptionally well, and you have just tuned in to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 111. It's all the ones today, 111, and Rory and I have one fantastic show lined up for you. We're going to be starting off speaking about avoiding plagiarism. If you are a student of counselling psychotherapy, you're writing assignments, how do you avoid plagiarism in your assignments? Then we delve into practice matters, and today you're going to be speaking, Rory, about something that comes up again and again, and that is self-disclosure.
Yes. How much of yourself do you share in the therapy room is what I'm going to be discussing, Ken. And how do we manage that? And what do we have to think about before we do?
Interesting topic, and it comes up so often. In fact, this very question is taken from our Facebook page. And if you're not a member of the Counselling Tutor Facebook page, get yourself in there. Just go into Facebook, put in the words Counselling Tutor. We're right there at the top. Knock on the door. Come in and join tens of thousands of fellow like-minded students, counsellors, supervisors and tutors as we discuss the topics that matter in counselling. But we're going to be ending episode 111 today by our third topic, and that is rejecting a supervisor. What do we mean by that one, Rory? Interesting.
Well, I mean, good practice, and I'm sure that tutors will be saying to their students, you know, interview a supervisor. Don't just go for one. Go and see a few and see which one fits better for you, because you're going to be taking your practice, you're going to be taking your clients, you're going to be taking your experiences, and it's really important you get the best fit for you. And in that interview, there may be some that you just don't feel fit. What do you do if you've been to see a supervisor and you know they're not a good fit for you? Do you just not contact them again, or do you contact them? What do you do, or what do you do if you're changing your supervisor?
Like it.
How do you move on from that? So I'm going to be giving some observations on that.
I like it. It's got a nice broad range on it there. So if you're a student, finding a supervisor, and if you are qualified, and you may come to a point where you need to move supervisors, you feel a need for a change. So we're going to be ending today's episode with that. But let's start at the top, and that is avoiding plagiarism in assignments. I can hear the dramatic music, dun, 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 playing as we say assignment and plagiarism in the same sentence, Rory.
Indeed. And when I was teaching, part of my work was to work with young people. I taught young people health and social care courses for a time. And I got one assignment handed in. It was beautiful. It was a lovely piece of work. And then I noticed that at the bottom, it had Wikipedia written on it. And I thought, Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia, of course, is an online directory. It's an encyclopedia. So I asked the students to come in and I said, is this your own work? Oh, yes. So I said, well, do you write for Wikipedia? Because Wikipedia has this, and everything you've written in your assignment is an exact copy and paste. And then there was a little bit of a red face, some minor embarrassment. And, well, I was actually a bit late, so I copied and pasted it. And some people do it deliberately because they just, quite frankly, are lazy. But other people don't realise that the idea of writing assignments, and this is the majority of people, the idea of writing assignments is to put it in your own words. And plagiarism is where you use someone else's words and pass them off as your own.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up time and time again. And the thing is, if you are a student and you are using somebody else's work, there are checks and balances in place to pick that up. Colleges, universities, learning institutions invest in software that they're able to put the assignments through, and it kind of scans through them, matches them against the database. And if there's a match within that database, it's flagged up and then it's further investigated. So avoid it. That's the first point, is avoid it. But if you've listened to the Counselling Tutor podcast, if you've been to Counselling Tutor, then you're going to know that Rory and I run a paid-for side of Counselling Tutor, and it's called Counselling Study Resource. And in Counselling Study Resource, we have a multitude, I'm going to use that word, Rory, because it means a lot, a multitude of resources for students of counselling. And within those resources are completed assignments. These are assignments at various levels from various awarding bodies, and they're real assignments that have been submitted and have been marked as passing the grade, as it were. And these assignments, we had to think long and hard before making those assignments available and consider the ethics of that. But assignment exemplars are common in academia, so we were able to put them in there. But they're there, I guess, as a benchmark. Rory, how would you work with something like, if you have an example assignment, how do you work with it without falling foul of plagiarism?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And you're absolutely right, Ken. There's a big difference between copying something verbatim, in other words, verbatim's a word for word, and using an exemplar to be able to see how other people have constructed something. So the analogy I would use, because I love my analogies, is that if you've never built a building before, what you'd probably do is get plans from another building and have a look at it. What you wouldn't probably do is build that building exactly the same. You'd take some ideas from it, the structure of it, how it's laid out, but you put it into your own words. And you're absolutely correct. A lot of academic institutions use plagiarism testing software called Turnitin. One of them is called Turnitin. So if you send your assignment through the virtual learning environment, you upload it. What happens is overnight it goes to this huge database, which literally compares it to every other assignment that's ever been uploaded. And then the tutor gets a report to say how unique the assignment is. And the lower the number is better. So if it's like 4%, like someone else's assignment, that means actually it's pretty unique. If it's like 80% like someone else's assignment, that's the time you might need to call someone in and have a chat. And it will also highlight if there's anything being copied and pasted off the internet. So, that is why they use it. The reason it exists, of course, is because in the age of the internet, it's impossible for tutors to keep abreast of what's being written. So the computer software does it for them. And I do know that awarding bodies buy exemplar assignments. Many years ago, when I first started teaching, someone sold their ABC Level 7, Unit 7 exemplar portfolio, the complete thing, on eBay. And the awarding body bought a copy and then sent a letter saying that if anybody hands it in, it'll be compared against that. So the awarding bodies know, that people use exemplars, and also that people use other people's work, which is what they're after. So, yeah, and I also want to say that if you've never written an academic assignment before, it can be a massive learning curve, because if a lot of people, certainly like myself, second timers into education, turn up and you're given an assignment, and it's like, well, what do I do with this? How do I write it? I've come back to education after 20, 30 years. So some people plagiarize not because they cheated, it's just because they just don't know any better.
Yeah, and I guess that's what we're talking about here. We wouldn't for a moment think that someone's studying something as ethically robust as counselling training would then go and purposely copy someone else's work. But you can fall foul of plagiarism without actually knowing it. So I think that's really important to note. And a way of working around that is anything that you are referencing. It may, whether it be a book, whether it be an article that you may have got from counsellingtutor.com or from our YouTube channel, or something that you've lifted from one of our podcasts, or even if you have one of our assignment exemplars and you've got that one side, is to maybe refer to that before you write your assignment. Look over the resources that you do have, but then write your assignment yourself. And then come back to the resource at the end and then match it against it. So you use it as a benchmark rather than having it there the whole time and referring to it again and again and again. And when you were speaking, Rory, about the the 4% match and the 80% match when it's run through the plagiarism tester, you're going to get a match because the words of the theory are going to be the words of the theory. The 19 propositions is going to be written 19 propositions in your assignment, and it's going to be written 19 propositions in somebody else's assignment, and those propositions will remain the same. So there are going to be elements that remain the same, and that's okay. It's just about showing that you are putting it in your own words, because in an assignment, you're not teaching the theory or the concept to the person who is marking the assignment. They already know it, and that's how they get to mark it. All you're doing is showing that you have an understanding of it. And we all understand things in different ways. And you writing your assignment, you will bring your personality and your way of understanding that into that assignment. And that is what makes them unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also makes sure from the tutor's perspective that you understand what you're being taught, because after all, certainly at level 4 and above, you're going to be applying your learning into practice. So that is why, most practice courses now start at level 4. Well, all practice courses really start at level 4. And it allows the tutor to say, yes, this is how the person understands the theory and how they apply it. And that is why the assignments on any of the topics within the course are so important, because they're going to be applied. So yes, if you're unsure of plagiarism, what I would do is I would speak to your tutor. I'm going to share a little secret here. When I started my certificate, I'd never been into formal education for a lot of years, and I wasn't in formal education a lot. when I had to go, quite frankly, there's far better things to be getting on with when I was younger. I copied and pasted the entire ethical framework and submitted it as an assignment, and a very kindly, patient tutor sat down and said to me, when was the last time you did an assignment? And it's like, I can't remember. And she said, right, okay, so you've copied, and I was arguing the case. Yes, well, this is what you're asking for. And she said, yes, but we need it in your own words, Rory. And I went out and I'm like, oh, well, there you have it, in my own words. Who knew?
Yeah, and that's it. Who knew? And it's okay to make those kind of mistakes as you go along. And I guess, like you say, Rory, you had a wise and accepting tutor who was marking that for you. But relax into the assignments. That really falling foul of it is when you deliberately go out to take someone else's work, pass it off as yourself because you couldn't be bothered doing the work or taking the time and energy to put that in, or you've left it too late. That is to be avoided at all costs. It really is. But there you have it. A bit of a discussion on the topic of plagiarism in assignments. And you mentioned there, Rory, practice, and that's about what we're jumping into now, and that is practice matters. And you're going to be discussing the topic of self-disclosure. It comes up again and again, and there seems to be a number of different camps on this. There is the no, you do not disclose part of self under any circumstances. There is the camp of you do expose parts of self if it is appropriate, and there's the middle camp of, well, I'm not really sure. So hopefully after today's Practice Matters, we should have a better understanding.
Yes, and I think that it's about an individual practitioner's view. I think it's strongly influenced by which modality you practice. But I've found in my own personal therapy, and also I was working as a therapist, that thoughtful, boundaried self-disclosure can be really, really useful.
So let's get straight into Practice Matters after dipping into a short message from our paid-for service, which is called Counselling Study Resource.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Self-disclosure in counselling. Through training, counselling students are taught not to self-disclose, as quite rightly, the session is about the client and not about their counsellor's story or difficulties. Newly qualified counsellors can struggle with this issue because sometimes it becomes clear that a little self-disclosure can help the client normalise their feelings. For example, the client who states that she cannot understand why after the death of a friend, other members of the friendship group seem to be getting on with their lives. some even going on holiday the day after the funeral. The counsellor responds, "It seems you cannot understand why your friends are not grieving in the way you are. When my husband died, the day after the funeral, I had a short break in Turkey. I went scuba diving. We both agreed it before he died. People grieve in different ways." At that moment, the counsellor's self-disclosure both normalised and acknowledged the grieving of the clients and her friends. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of self-disclosure? Well, the advantages is that it can help the client build trust with you and develop a stronger therapeutic relationship. It can help reduce the inherent power differences that are always present in a counselling relationship, and it provides validation, normalising a client's feelings or worldview. There's also something about role modelling. It shows the client how others deal appropriately with issues they are experiencing. But there are some disadvantages. The client may seem more of a friend, which could compromise the therapeutic relationship. Self-disclosure, if done without thought, can shift the focus from the client onto the counsellor. Clients may also feel under pressure to share their stories. And finally, role confusion. The client may think the counsellor's problems are more important than theirs and hold back speaking about their issues, or even try to counsel the counsellor. So given that every client is different, it can be difficult to predict how they will respond to self-disclosure. However, checking in with the client can be useful to get a sense of how the client feels and experiences the therapeutic relationship. And finally, ask yourself who benefits from the self-disclosure. The answer to this question will inform what you disclose and how much.
Thank you as always, Rory. And speaking about disclosure, the word that comes up for me, and I guess the camp that I sit comfortably in, is appropriate self-disclosure, when it is thought through, when it is correct, when it is appropriate. But a really interesting topic. And as always, Rory has created a super duper handout on self-disclosure that you can have. And it is free of charge. All you need to do is go to our website. That is counsellingtutor.com. We're on the internet. Counselling spelt with 2 L's because we are based in the United Kingdom. That's our spelling way. Counsellingtutor.com. Go to the top tab of our website and you'll see there's a little tab that says podcast. Click on that. Go to episode 111, easy to remember, 111. All the show notes of today's podcast are there with links out to any additional resources that match the topics we're discussing. And right from within that page, you can download Rory's free handout on self-disclosure. You put in your email and we will send it to your inbox. And of course, as always, if you are a member, a valued member of our paid-for resource, Counselling Study Resource, well, we've already taken that handout and we've placed it into your handouts vault for you. You just log in and enjoy it whenever you want. It is waiting for you. So moving away from self-disclosure onto our final topic for episode 111, and that is rejecting a supervisor.
Yes, I always used to say to my students when they were coming to choose a supervisor to interview as many as they felt comfortable with. Go and see them. And the reason for that is because supervision is a very personal, special relationship. I think I once heard it quoted as where the profession can breathe. And you want to work with someone as a supervisor that you can really talk about all your practice and all the stuff that's going on for you within the practice. And as human beings, we get on better with some people than others, and supervisors are the same in this. So people will go and see different supervisors and find a supervisor that fits them. I do say there's a caveat with this. I used to say to the students, if you see a supervisor and you're not quite sure, you feel uncomfortable, have a think about why. Have a think about why. Is there any I got it in again, didn't I? Again. Transference. Is there any transference there? And think about why that is. Don't just reject a supervisor because you don't like them. Have a thoughtful view of it. Do a small analysis on what it is that is putting you off seeing that supervisor. But if you've seen a lot of supervisors, what do? Do you not contact them again and just go with the supervisor you've chosen, or do you phone the supervisor up and give them some feedback? And this is something that's come up in our Facebook group. And someone asked, well, what do you do? Do you phone them up? I would prefer as a supervisor for someone to phone me up and say, I'm not working with you at the moment, Rory, and this is the reason why, because that helps me. It might be something around cost that happens sometimes. It might be something about the modality. You know, I'm a TA therapist, and you're basically person-centered base. That's fine. It might be, and this has never happened, but it might be, well, I just don't think I can get on with you. In which case, I might. That's another conversation. But I think it is useful, and it leads into a wider conversation about what happens when you move on from a supervisor.
Yeah.
When you change your supervisor.
100%. So to look at that first part of rejecting a supervisor, the thing is we have choice. It's like so many things. We have choice with regards to ethical body, what course we go on. When we go to our personal counselling, we are offered choice. We can choose the counsellor. And your client, when they come to you as a practicing counsellor, they have choice as well. And they can go and have sessions with other counsellors before coming to you to kind of find what is right for them. So we have that choice. And working with my students, the message was, you got to find a supervisor. It is important. It's an ethical requirement. You've got to find a supervisor. And finding a supervisor is good. But finding the right supervisor is great. And you want to be going and speaking to a number of different supervisors and feeling what comes up for you. And again, you don't want to be too comfortable with a supervisor. It's not coffee and a chat and, I feel like it's chatting to an old friend. You're going to be looking for a little bit of challenge in there to develop yourself and your practice. But it's about finding who's right for you. And I agree with you. I think a few words by email just to respectfully let the person know that you won't be going to them, even if you don't want to give the reason for that, that's okay. It is just respectful to maybe send an email just saying, hey, you know what, thank you very much for the meeting, but I won't be taking you up on your offer of supervision this time. I think that it just puts out those good vibes all round. But interesting how you said you're in practice, you've maybe been with a supervisor, maybe through your studies, and you've come to the end of your studies and you're questioning, is this supervisor still right for me going into actual practice? Maybe you've been in practice for some years with a supervisor for some time and are considering moving on. How do you do that? How does that subject get brought up? Because you've formed this deep bond, this relationship with the supervisor you're working with. It's almost like a relationship, a marriage, a partnership, where it could be considered a difficult conversation to bring up. Rory, how might we do that?
Well, I think before we have that conversation, I think there's a few urban myths that kind of wander around the counselling world. One of them is that you should change your supervisor every 2 years. I have never ever seen anything written or anything that would evidence that is something that there's no evidence base for that. But there's a strong evidence base for having a supervisor that works with your developmental process. So when I started, I can remember so well my supervisor, and I did write him in one of my books about it felt like I was like a door being stripped in an acid bath, because she was so direct. And at that time, as I wrote, I needed that because I felt safe in her hands. My clients were safe in mine. And she was I thought at the time she was very strict. If I look back now, she wasn't. She was just doing a job. It was just that I was a photograph album salesman when I started, as a counsellor. So I knew nothing about this world. So when I went in, of course, there's going to be a steep learning curve. When I changed my supervisor, and that was because my supervisor had retired, I found another supervisor who fitted A, with my value systems professionally, B, with the client groups that I was working with, and C, because she had a huge amount, and still does if she's listening, she has a huge amount of practice experience, and she understands the way that I work. But I have to say that I'm always surprised at how fresh the relationship is. Because there'll be things that I'll take away from supervision, and it'll be like, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of that? So before you change your supervisor, you really need to think. And if you're a professional, if you're a qualified practitioner, you really need to think, what are you changing for? What is it that you need from a new supervisor you're not getting from your existing one? And I think that's the conversation to have with yourself. And once you've got that, then that's the time to have the conversation with your existing supervisor as you move on.
100%. So one way of maybe looking at this subject is to revisit your contract. If you are thinking you've had that thought process that you laid out there, Rory, and you've decided, yeah, maybe it is time for me to move on now, revisit the contract that you have with your supervisor. Good contract should have a revisit of the contract written into the contract as kind of near the bottom of the contract, that this contract will be reviewed from time to time when needed, or on a 3-monthly basis, or on a 6-monthly or a yearly basis, depending on the type of contract you're using. And you can bring up the contract and say, can we revisit that, and revisit that line of, we said we would bring this up from time to time, and let me tell you where I am at the moment, and share those honest, true feelings, the thought process that you've been through that you just described, Rory, with your current supervisor, and see where that road takes you. And I think you mostly from the supervisors that I've met, from being a supervisor myself, and from what you've mentioned, Rory, your supervisor is going to be open and receptive and not offended in any way.
No. And also I think, as a supervisor myself, I think that it's really healthy for a supervisee to come to you and say, you've taken me so far in my journey, I need somebody else. And that is a cause of celebration, because it's a cause of celebration because that person's realised that their developmental needs are best met somewhere else. Doesn't mean that me as a supervisor isn't competent. It just means they need something else. And, that is how the profession should be. So what a great episode. We started off with avoiding plagiarism, something that I didn't do in my early academic career too well or at all. Practice matters. We talked about self-disclosure and how we self-disclose. Should we self-disclose? How much should we self-disclose? And then finally, we finished on rejecting a supervisor. And hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.